It's episode 569 of the Locked On Texas Rangers podcast. On today's show, I'm breaking down the first 3 games of the Rangers regular season. We have actual baseball to talk about. I'm going to be talking about the Rangers opening day starter going on the injured list, Jack Leiter's first start, all that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On to the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Bryce Patrick, here covering the Texas Rangers, entering, I believe, my 9th season covering this team, coming out of a rebuild, having some actual baseball to talk about. I'm going to get into so much more this episode. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season for more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. Follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube. I'm wearing my fancy polo shirt. I know I don't normally dress up, but I was on actual television today. I think that's how it worked. I was on WFAA's midday show to talk about the Rangers home opener. Got to talk about Taylor Hearn, which I'll get into this episode, a little about him, some fun facts with him, but that was very nice of them to have me on the show and, look kind of fancy in my polo repping the Locked On Rangers podcast. Now let's talk about this weekend's games. We had a regular season opener and a home opener coming up today, and you know what? This regular opening day was just exactly like last year's opening day, in that it was a bonkers game. The Rangers went up big early. This year, they scored 4 runs in the top of the first inning. Last year, they scored 5 runs in the top of the first inning. But last year, they gave up 5 runs in the bottom of the first inning. Actually, I believe it was 6 runs and lost the lead and would end up losing that game. This time, the Rangers waited a little while. They scored another 2 runs in the second inning. They scored another run in the fourth. So they were up 7-0, and they would end up losing 8-10. Because this Toronto Blue Jays team is really stinking good. Brad Miller started off the season with a solo home run. I was losing my mind. I was talking so much trash. I forgot what it's like to cheer for a team that doesn't suck. And so I forgot you kind of wait more than 4 innings to start completely unloading the slams. But I felt good about it. The Rangers knocked Jose Barrios out super early in the game. He literally got 1 out, and he is a really great pitcher. They just signed him to a 7-year extension. It was a real bummer because he was going to be a free agent after this year, and I wanted the Rangers to go get him. But Jon Gray lasted 4 innings, struck out 4, looked mostly fine. I kind of like the new look slider with a little bit of that sweeping action, but he had a blister on his finger and had to come out after 70 pitches. And he's going to be on the IL. Because, of course, I'll talk into more about what's going to be. It's going to be, I believe, a 15-day IL, so basically 2 weeks, and I'll get into who's going to start in his place a little bit later in the episode. But I wanted to give some shout-outs to some standouts. Obviously, Brad Miller looked amazing. Nick Solak looked fantastic. Corey Seager has a multi-hit game in every single game. Is he going to get multiple hits in every single game for his entire Rangers career of that 10-year contract? I mean, at this point, statistically, he is on pace to do so. He does not have a home run yet, but that's fine. He has a double, and gosh, his at-bats look crazy, including a really weird one on Sunday. I've never seen a bat break like that. Just the handle just snapped off in between his hands. I have never seen that in my thousands of baseball games that I have watched. I've never even heard of that happening. I mean, I've heard it break off above where your hands are, but not in between. That was just weird. The little knob of the bat, he was choked up and he took a swing and bat just broke. It was one of the weirder things I've ever seen. Also, some great starts to this season. Jonah Heim has been really great in the couple of games that he has played in so far offensively. Defensively, he looked pretty fine. Brock Burke, welcome back to the major freaking leagues, coming back and having a fantastic outing, 2 innings, and striking out basically everyone that he faced. He did allow a hit and a walk, but he struck out 5 of his 6 outs were on strikeouts. The guy was absolutely dealing, and you love to see it. He's going to be a multi-inning piece in that pen. I don't know if he's going to get to a chance to move into the starting rotation, But the guy who started that game, I got to talk about some bad starts so far. Spencer Howard had about the worst start you can have. He did strike out 5 in 3 innings. That was really nice. He didn't walk anybody, but he did not look like he knew where his pitches were going, and they were going to the heart of the plate to give up 4 home runs in 3 innings. Now, it is against this Toronto Blue Jays team, which is probably the best offense in baseball if it's not the Dodgers, and I'd lean more towards this team. We got home runs from George Springer, who is second now against the Rangers in career active home runs against. Actually, he might be third behind Pujols and Mike Trout. Mike Trout I know is the leader. I think Pujols might be second, but he's definitely up there in the top 3 now that Kyle Seager is gone. The Rangers got to Hyunjin Ryu as well and, knocked him around a little bit, but Howard had a really rough start. Jon Gray, obviously being injured, that's not a great start. He looked fine, pretty solid when he was in there. Calhoun against this really tough lineup. Marcus Semien has not done super well to start the season, but again, it's literally like 3 games. I'm not even going to read you his stats. I'm just saying that he's not started well. You're not allowed to actually look at until you have at least 10 games. Then you can be like, all right, let's make something of this. Unless, you're proving your point on your own podcast about how great everything is going. But Dane Dunning, longest start of the Rangers season so far, 5 innings, pretty solid. He allowed 3 earned runs, 5 hits, allowed a home run, a walk, struck out 4. Just, fine. That's fine against this lineup. That's about all you can ask for. This is a really, really tough lineup, and it's not like Dane Dunning's got the most elite stuff, but he's a really solid pitcher, and he did his job. 5 innings and 3 runs in his first start. Nobody else went more than 4. Jon Gray went 4. Spencer Howard went 3. I don't know how many innings we're going to get from Taylor Hearn in this one. I'm probably thinking about 4 or 5. Maybe he might make it to 6 if he gets really economical with his pitch count and staying in the zone. But that's about what you're wanting. It's going to be a while before these starting pitchers get up to their normal workload of throwing 100 pitches and being able to go out there every 5th day. That's why they have the expanded roster, so you can have expanded bullpen and more guys that go multi-innings and throw quite a few pitches on the relief standpoint to make up for that shortened spring training, which really is looking like it's pretty much only affecting the pitchers and Marcus Semien as well. But Andy Ibanez has also started the season a little bit slow. It's fine. It's 3 games so far. He hasn't had any, terrible plate appearances, and his defense has looked pretty solid at third base. Also played a little bit of first base as well. And unlucky start to the season, it's been Willie Calhoun. He doesn't have a hit yet. He hasn't struck out. He hasn't walked. He just hit the baseball really, really hard. But Toronto's defense in the infield it's probably the best in baseball. They got Bo Bichette, who is, if he didn't win a Gold Glove last year, then he probably should have because he's an excellent defender at shortstop. They have probably the best defensive player in all of baseball in Matt Chapman at third base, making some incredible throws. Kevin Biggio plays a little bit of second for him. Vladdy is fine at first base. It's fine. But the other two, basically that left side of the infield, is definitely the best defensive left side of the infield in baseball. The rest of their guys, George Springer is pretty solid in the outfield, and the rest of their outfield is, it's fine. But when you got that left side of the infield that are snagging baseballs and just absolutely robbing Willie Calhoun, he has been pretty unlucky to start the season, and I'm hoping that some of that luck starts to change because Willie Calhoun has had enough bad luck, as has Jon Gray, to start his season already on the IL. I'm going to get into who's going to make up those Jon Gray starts if somebody's ready in the minor league. Speaking of the minor leagues, I was at Jack Leiter's first professional start. I'm going to get into how well that went. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting odds, stats, and sports info. You can find the latest sports developments, league reviews, news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. You can head to the website, check out their odds. They've got the Rangers as plus 600 favorites to make the playoffs, so that's 6-1 odds, and minus 1,000 favorites to not make the playoffs. They imply that the Rangers have a 90.9 chance of not making the playoffs. Not 99%, just 90, so around 91%. So if you want to go and make a wager, go to betonline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now let's look into some pitching that's happened this season. The Rangers have quite a few pitching prospects that are really, really solid in their system. And a few guys that are right on the verge, some guys who have made some major league starts, including a guy who also started a decent amount last season. They've got in AAA, they've got these guys alone. They've got Matt Moore. I know, I heard it. I did start with him because he has a 0 ERA in his 3 innings so far in AAA. Glenn Otto, also a 0 ERA in 3 innings with 5 strikeouts. Looked really, really solid. Nick Snyder, well, I guess he's not going to start, but Cole Winn looked pretty solid in his 4 innings of work in his AAA debut. Jake Latz is there. He's made a couple of starts as well. 5 innings total for him. AJ Alexi beat around a little bit. 5 strikeouts in 3 innings, 3 hits, 3 earned runs, 3 walks as well. Those are the guys who are kind of on the verge, and you might think about calling them up, but there's a reason they started these guys in AAA. There's a reason, because all of them need more reps. Glenn Otto is probably about the most of what he is right now. I don't know how much better he's going to get with AAA reps, but I think the Rangers want to give him a chance to be a starter for as long as he can. I think eventually he's going to end up in the bullpen, but you got to at least give him a chance. If you got some spots in AAA for him to be a starter and to try and stretch out there, then I think that makes sense. Matt Moore, I just don't want to see Matt Moore pitch for the Texas Rangers again at the major league level. I really don't. Cole Winn, he needs some seasoning. He is the best pitching prospect in AAA right now for the Texas Rangers. And AJ Alexi, again, he needs some more seasoning. He looked fine in his major league starts last year. I think it might have been a bit premature, but the Rangers were kind of desperate at that point with the amount of pitchers they had lost to on the COVID IL towards the back end of the season, which is when he made his call up. But he needs some more time. He kind of blazed through the system, was really, really great at every stop he was at, but he didn't pitch that many stops. So he needs some more seasoning, as does Cole Winn as well. And a guy who also needs more seasoning, yeah, that's right, Jack Leiter. In case you were wondering if he was going to be good at throwing baseballs, as good as he was at Vanderbilt, this was the best pitching performance I've seen from a Rangers. Someone wearing a Rough Riders uniform since Yu Darvish was making a rehab start here and looking absolutely disgusting. Jack Leiter was nasty. He was real nasty. He sat 93 to 96 with his fastball. He touched 98 several times. He had it whenever he wanted. His spin rate was anywhere from 2,400 to 25, 23, which is the highest. Basically, the average spin rate for a Major League Baseball four-seamer is 2309. So he was well above that. The Reds led all of Major League Baseball with their average fastball spin rate being 2489 RPM. Trevor Bauer in 2020 led all pitchers with a 2823 RPM. So he's not the most elite, but it's a really, really good rate, especially for the velocity that he is throwing it at. He used he didn't use the changeup at all. I think he used the cutter a couple of times. He used the slider and the curveball. The curveball he was getting for called strikes. He had it whenever he wanted. He started 3 guys off with the curveball for a called strike on the very first pitch. That is a big ball move, and it's because he was being a little squeezed a little bit on his command for his fastball. The strike zone was a little smaller than I think he would have liked, but he threw 60 pitches. 33 of those were for strikes. He walked, I believe, 2, struck out 6 in 3 innings. It was absolutely beautiful. He said there was a lot on the table that he feels like he could have improved on. His family was there. He was just incredibly excited to be there. And of course, we got Jordan Procession, backup catcher, come in and close out a game. The Rough Riders were up several runs in the top of the 9th inning, but they allowed 3 runs, and they were basically out of pitchers who hadn't exceeded their pitch count. And so, of course, Jordan Procession comes in a 1-run game to pitch to a batter, and he gets the save because minor league baseball is super weird. But as for guys who I think are going to come in and take some of those Jon Gray starts, as much as I don't love it, I think Colby Allard is the logical choice. He is already on the major league roster. He has some experience in starting. And while it's not going to be pretty, it should be fine. He's only expected to miss a couple of weeks. Right now, I believe for the first month of the season, the pitcher's IL is going to be 15 days. So if they do place him on the IL, they can't just use that to cycle guys in and out basically through one start or miss one start and keep cycling guys back in. The hitter's IL is still 10 days. And I think it'll go back to that after the rosters, shrink back to normal on May 1st, but I'm not exactly sure about that. I'll have to double check. But yeah, I think Kolby Aller is going to make those starts. Martin Perez is not announced officially as the Tuesday starter, but I'm pretty darn sure that's going to be his time to start. And the Rangers were a little concerned about him being ready for his first start of the season. That's why he is all the way back to the number 5 spot in this rotation. But they also wanted to give Taylor Hearn a little bit of time to start. Now, in case you didn't know this about Taylor Hearn, he's a really interesting guy. But he's from Royce City, so he's from the area. It's a little bit northeast of Rockwall. His grandfather might be one of the most interesting people in recent history. He was the first black man to get a college scholarship for rodeo stuff. I'm not exactly sure how it was supposed to be phrased, but that was at Oklahoma State, who are the Cowboys, so kind of fitting. Taylor was growing up around the rodeo stuff. He participated in it. He knows all about that rodeo lifestyle, and his grandfather also was the first professional black cowboy. He was also part of JFK's honor guard. Just really, really interesting guy. And Taylor Hearn has made his push to be in the starting rotation, and I think he might be the one. I was leaning more towards Spencer Howard because he had a really, really great spring. And Taylor Hearn had a pretty solid spring as well, and a really solid back end of last year as a starter. He's starting to trust his stuff a little bit more, or trusting his defense more than trying to do everything and strike everybody out. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he can give in this much anticipated home opener. It's not an opening day start. He is not the Rangers opening day starter. He is not the top of this rotation, but he is fighting with several guys for his baseballing life to be a starting pitcher on the next actually contending Rangers team, which might end up being just next year. But that's what this season is all about for him, and I am really excited to see what he does in that first start and gets that much celebrated hype on this very, very special day. Now, we talked a lot about pitching, and this offense has really started to look like they can hit with the absolute best of them. Coming up, I'm going to get into what we think of this offense, if our expectations should be changed up a little bit. But first, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. That's right, you guys know Built Bar. It's the most delicious tasting protein bar that is out there. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It tastes even better than some candy bars. They are delicious. They are filled with, they're covered in chocolate, and they are soft. They're easy to chew. They're just fantastic. They taste better than candy bars. You can go to built.com and check out the macros chart. You'll be blown away. They're high in protein, low in calorie, high in fiber, low in carbs. Most Built bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. If you want to go try these out for yourself, you can go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Now, one of the things that I was a little worried about this Rangers team is their commitment to the platoon. And with the hot first 3 games of the season, which, you should take all of this with a grain of salt. But it's looking like there are 2 platoon players in left field in Brad Miller and Nick Solak might be pretty decent. Nick Solak has literally only played in 1 game, 5 plate appearances, but in that 1 game, he was really dang good. He walked twice, he had a home run, he had a pair of hits. He was 2 for 3 in his at-bats. He has an OPS of 24.67, which is really dang good. The Rangers have 7 players at this point through 3 games with an OPS over 900. That's Jonah Heim, 1413, Nathaniel Lowe, 955, Corey Seager, 1038, Brad Miller, 1385, Mitch Garver, 919, Charlie Culverson, 1000, and like I said, Nick Solak, 2467. Now, I don't think that the Rangers are going to have 7 players with an OPS over 900 at the end of the year, unless some things go really, really well. I definitely don't think that Charlie Culverson is going to end the year with an OPS of 1,000. I'm sorry, I'm putting it out there. I feel pretty good about that strong take that I'm laying my claim to. Marcus Semien didn't have the greatest start to the season. He's looked fine. I think he was pushing a little bit. There's a lot of pressure with him, and I'm worried that he'll push a little bit in the opening day start. It feels weird to just completely overanalyze every single bit of every single game, but that's where we're at. We don't have a large data sample to take into account and kind of try and put our heads around how it's going. But I think this lineup is really deep, and and I'm really excited to see how it looks towards the end of the season. But like the bottom third, I think that's the biggest difference. I mean, well, it's hard not to say the top third of, Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, and Mitch Garver. I mean, because that's a huge difference from what they had last year, where Adolis Garcia was pretty much the entire offense towards the back end of the year. And they're counting on Nathaniel Lowe to do a whole lot more than he, probably should have been asked to do. But the bottom third, there's not really a weak spot in this lineup at this point. I mean, occasionally you'll have some Charlie Culberson who will be just fine. But when Willie Calhoun is going to be your number 9 hitter, and whatever you think of Willie Calhoun and his inconsistencies and whatever, and obviously he doesn't have a hit to start the season, but if Willie Calhoun is your number freaking 9 hitter, that is about as deep a lineup as most places will find. This lineup is stacked with, you have the star power in the top 3. The middle 3, maybe there's some room for improvement there, but the bottom 3 is solid above average major leaguers. And if you don't have a single below average major league bat in your lineup, that's going to make up for that middle third middle third not being, in the elite status. Even if your top 3 guys are, some of the better hitters in baseball, if that middle 3 is just fine, about average for where that middle third should be in Adolis, Nathaniel Lowe, and, Cole Calhoun. But the bottom 3 is looking really, really solid. Brad Miller in a leadoff role, I was a little skeptical of it, but if he's going to hit a leadoff home run to start a lot of games, then I'm okay with that being the option there. But I'm a little curious about Mitch Garver and how the Rangers are going to manage him this season. He only caught the first game. He did not play that much in the second. I think he came in to pinch hit, and then he DH'd on Sunday's game. He'll be starting at catcher on today's game. But again, some of those concerns that I had about the depth of catching, while I like Jonah Heim, if he's going to have an OPS of 14-13 for the whole season, hit 429, and have an on-base over 500, then I will get over some of those concerns. But there's really not a lot of depth behind there. Yohel Pozo, I was talking with Levi Weaver and arguing with him about how I really did not get the trade of Jose Trevino. Just why are you so hesitant, or why are you so quick to rush off? And, Abreu seems fine. He hasn't pitched yet, but his numbers seem like there's something there. If anybody that throws gas and has a pretty nasty breaking ball, they should be pretty solid in the pen. But if Jonah Heim is gonna do something like this, and I just am curious how they're going to manage Mitch Garver. I think they should DH him a little bit more because that bat is just way too valuable. I mean, it'd be nice to have him just as a luxury, just sprinkle him in hitting fourth. If you add another big bat this offseason, like a Joey Gallo, or, pick a big bat of your choosing, there's really not that many, so Joey Gallo seems like the most likely fit. Not just that I shoehorn him into pretty much every episode where I can, but if you can have Mitch Garver, if you had those other big 3, but the drop-off from, the third best hitter to the fourth best hitter, well, I don't know. Nathaniel Lowe's looking really good right now, and I think he'll take a big step forward. But Adolis hasn't looked super great. He had a home run to start the season, but he's been swinging at a bunch of pitches outside the zone, which is not as encouraging. Cole Calhoun hasn't done that much, but again, it's 3 games, and I don't know how much I'm expecting from him in general moving forward to just be more than anything just fine. But Garver's bat is too important to this lineup. If the Rangers are trying to claw towards 500, they need him in there as many times as they can. And while he said his offense, he doesn't feel as comfortable at the plate when he's not catching, even him on an off day is much better than, most of the vast majority of this lineup, because his bat is just so big and so loud and plays so well for this team. But I'm curious how the Rangers are going to change the construction of their lineup depending on how well Willie Calhoun hits versus Cole Calhoun. I think that's the most likely change that would come about in this batting order. There may be a little bit of switching of Nathaniel Lowe and Adolis Garcia, who's hitting fourth versus fifth versus, third sometimes when Mitch Garver's not playing, or maybe when, Marcus Semien, or I guess Corey Seager is more likely to be the one to take a day off. But I want to see a little bit more from this team. Brock Burke having a really solid outing out of the pen is really encouraging, and this pen by the way, it was not a great couple of games for this bullpen. The Rangers giving up that big lead, but the offense came up big with 11 unanswered runs, I should say, against the Toronto Blue Jays. And the fact that they were able to hit these starting pitchers as hard as they did for Toronto, their first 3 pitchers, they're all really solid. I mean, Hyunjin Ryu is a really, really good starting pitcher. He has been very good for several years, and I want to say that he finished top 5 in Cy Young voting. 1 year, if not 2 years. I don't have his baseball reference page up here, and I wish that MLB.com had his page up here. But they really knocked him around, getting 6 runs on him, including a home run in 3 1/3 innings. They knocked Jose Barrios out after getting literally 1 out, and they hit Gausman pretty well. They weren't able to hit the ball as hard against him. They didn't get a home run off of him, but he did go 5 innings, and they gave up 3 runs. So basically exactly what Dane Dunning did. But, Dane Dunning had 2 walks and 4 strikeouts versus Gausman's 0 walks and 5 strikeouts. But again, this Rangers offense can hit against anybody, but it was not a great week for the pen to start this season. Outside of Brock Burke, John Keane got absolutely lit up, pitched 2/3 of an inning and gave up 2 runs. Josh Sborz got lit up as well, gave up 3 hits, 3 runs in his 1 inning of work. Dennis Santana gave up a run in his first inning of work, and Greg Holland gave up a home run in his first inning of work. The Rangers bullpen just got battered on opening day. It wasn't as bad. It did much better. Brett Martin did end up getting saddled with the loss in Saturday's game. He gave up a couple of hits in his 2/3 of an inning. Spencer Patton came in and tried to shut the door as best he could, but the damage was done. The Rangers offense was not going to do anything more, and Matt Bush made close out the game as best he could and didn't allow a run, but the Rangers just were not able to get to the rest of this pen on that day. But this pen needs some consistency. It needs some of these veteran arms. I don't know. I wasn't that excited about Matt Bush. He seems fine. I really still don't get the Josh Sborz love. I just have never really gotten it. He seems fine, but fine is not good enough. When the Rangers get Jose Leclerc and Jonathan Hernandez back, I don't want to see as much of Josh Sborz as I've seen of him over the last couple of years. Dennis Santana, I'm kind of mixed on, and I get the Greg Holland bit for now. Having a veteran guy in there who knows how to close out games, who has been an elite closer and knows what it takes, and having that kind of, calming presence out there, I think that makes sense. I guess that's kind of why they have Matt Bush in there for the same reason, although I think he might be a little bit better than Greg Holland at this point, but he has less veteran experience. He is just old, but he has been around with the Rangers since, I believe, 2015 or 2016, because he was the one who threw that pitch that started that brawl against these Toronto Blue Jays, of which there's basically nobody that was on that team, on either of these teams anymore. But I don't know. This bullpen needs some help. It needs some of these guys who throw just absolutely disgusting gas, and I think there's a couple of guys that are, in the minor leagues that are not too far behind. Yuri Rodriguez is pretty much just going to be coming out of the pen this year. He needs to work on using something other than his fastball. His fastball is really, really stinking good, but if that's all you throw, then you're going to get hit by major leaguers because they're just too dang good. He hasn't had a great couple of first outings. He's pitched 2 2/3 innings, gave up 6 hits, 4 runs in those first 2 outings and a 13 ERA, but I think he's going to make the majors at some point this year in the pen. I don't really know why Nick Snyder isn't in this bullpen. I really don't. He is too good. His stuff is too nasty. He is much better than, I'd say, half, if not most of the guys. His raw stuff is better than pretty much everyone in this bullpen. Now, he could use a little bit more refinement, but he didn't have a great start to his major league career. It was fine, but it wasn't super great. He did get hit hard a couple of times, but I don't know. He's going to be up there at some point in this major league bullpen, but I really would like to see him in there sooner as opposed to later because his stuff is too nasty. You have a guy who throws triple digits and also rocks the glasses. I am going to be partial towards that guy, but I don't know. I think this bullpen, as of right now, is a weak spot for this team, and I kind of glossed over it because the rest of the team was so bad. You kind of didn't notice the bullpen being that bad by comparison. You're like, oh, well, the starting pitcher went 4 innings and gave up 7 runs. That wasn't great. The offense had like 2 hits and looked absolutely miserable. But the bullpen didn't give up like 17 runs, so like the bullpen's fine. But now that the Rangers are getting more towards being a competitive team, you kind of remember, oh, yeah, this bullpen could use some guys with some grade A velocity, disgusting breaking pitches, something like that. They don't have a whole lot of that. They have it. There are some guys that not everybody has to throw 103 miles an hour with a curveball that starts 10 feet above your head and finishes right at your knees for a strike. Like, there are multiple ways to get guys out, and the Raiders have some guys that are more crafty, but you do sometimes need that guy who throws the premium gas, has that disgusting breaking pitch in there to retire major league hitters, because major league hitters are just too dang good to be gotten by someone without excellent velocity and stuff, unless their command and things like that are on, absolute point. But the Rangers have a home opener today. Taylor Hearn gets the start. I'll be talking later this week, maybe in tomorrow's episode. It might end up being on Wednesday, with Lindsey Crosby of Locked On Prospects. We're going to talk about Frisco's Media Day, about Jack Leiter, and then I'll also be talking with Paul of Locked On Rockies about this series, about Jon Gray, about what the heck his team is doing with Chris Bryant, why that makes any sense for them, and we'll see what happens for the rest of this week. But I'll definitely be recording with those two guys in the next couple of days for the next couple of those. But thank you guys so much for making Locked On Raiders your first listen every single day. That'll do it for this edition. Until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.